This is Don with Virtual 360 Images. Today we're going to work on replacing the background, part 2. We're going to use layers on this one. This is in Photoshop Elements 13. The last one we did that we removed the background, we used a color. We actually painted the background green because of a lot of the detail that was in it and overlaps, and we talked a little bit about that there. This one we're going to use layers and a mask. You'll find that in this one we have a lot straighter lines to work with. To start out with, I wanted to show you what we're going to work with, what the end results is going to be. This was taken at a car show. I liked it. It fits into my era of tea roasters and stuff like that. But you can see up around the sides and the top and up around through those places, there's pretty straight lines. The other part I like about this one is the shadows. The shadows stayed in the picture, which really sets it off when you put it into a background. What we're going to do is layers, and we're going to talk quite a bit about layers. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn the background into transparent without coming out. We're not going to change it to a different color. We're going to just automatically go right straight from this to transparent. Once we get everything into transparent, I picked out a sand beach background, which I thought looked fairly nice for this one, and I set him on the beach. As you notice, as you look at the picture, the shadows and everything fit right in, and I think that finished off the picture. So to get started, we're going to open up Photoshop Elements 13. As we get started, if you go up here on the right top corner, you'll see a blue area that's marked background. What we want to do is create another layer. There's several ways of doing it. I think this is the simplest one for right now. You're going to bring the mouse up over the top anywhere on that blue. Use the right mouse button, come down where it says duplicate layer. So it's going to create another layer. What I'm suggesting, and I think it's in the book, you're going to rename that as layer. I always put space 01 and click OK. If you're in an area where you're using a lot of layers, I will start them off as 01, 02, 03, 04, so I know what series or sequence that I brought that in. So now we have background, layer 1. We're going to come up here. The little blue box with the hole in the middle is called Add Layer Mask, and you'll see that put that right there in layer 1's box. You also want to make sure that one stays highlighted. I can move that around, but at the same time we want to keep that one highlighted. This, first of all, I'm going to make a mistake to show you what happens. So if you happen to run across it and think, what just happened? I don't know what to do about it. I'm going to come over here on Quick Selection Tools, and I'm going to come down here, and for right now I'm just going to use the Quick Selection tool. And I've got my brush up to a 93 pixel. I'm going to come across here, and I'm just going to kind of go everywhere I want to go. And I talked about there's several keys that we're going to use quite a bit, and I use control keys. I've mentioned that before. Instead of going up to the top to edit and coming down to the word cut, if you notice there's control keys beside everything. I use the control X. That is to remove or cut. Control X. And then I also use the control S for save and the control Z for undo or remove. Now you've noticed that nothing happened. If you go over here and look in the top part on the right hand side, in the black box, it actually turned black, the area that I marked off. But nothing happened. If I come down here to the background layer, come over here, there's like a little eye indicator. I'm visible. I'm going to click on that, which will put a line through it which turns that off. So I want the background turned off. So if you happen to end up with you've done everything and nothing's showing, check over here under your background and make sure that there's an X through that. Now real quick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to back off by undoing by the Control Z, and we're back to where we started. We still have our layer 1 background. First thing I want to do is go up here, put a slash through that little eyeball and the background one. So everything's going to be in the layer 1. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to come down here to the quick selection. There's another box that you're going to run into, which is called add and subtract. Add, subtract, add, subtract. We're going to add. But I'll show you here in a little bit, if you happen to cut into some place where it didn't work out, then we're going to do the subtract. We're going to use the magic wand quite a bit. The magic wand will go around and identify the edges as much as possible, and in some cases it'll be right on the money. If it's not, we're going to show you how to fix that. So I'm going to use the magic wand. Come over here, and just between the front tire and the back tire, for an example, I'm going to come in here and you can see where the wand's at. I'm going to click once, and you can see where it has actually outlined the shadows. There's some stuff out here that we need to touch up. Shadowed around the back of the tire, up over the top. I'm going to use the Control X. Cleaned up quite a bit of that. I'm going to come down here in the front, do the same thing. Click. It got 90% of it. Hit the Control X. Now there's some rough areas in there that we're going to have to come back and manually take out. There's no question about that. I'm going to come up here on the roof and see where we're at on that one. Got some of it, but it kind of got a hold of the clouds. But let's go ahead and do a Control X and get rid of as much as we can. Now we can come back up in here where that cloud is, and maybe the cloud will pick up some more of it. Click that little area next where the cloud was, hit the X, Control X, hit again, hit Control X. We've got a lot of touching up to do down here, but we'll get that in a little bit. I'm going to hit the other part of the sky, Control X. See, we're cleaning up quite a bit of it out of there, but then we're going to get into some areas like right here with the tree. We're going to have to manually come in here and do some of that. I can come back here by the back of the cab. There's an area there. I can Control X. Don't know what I can do up here. Control X. Let's go over here on the other side on where the car next to it is. Control X. So we can go through and pick up quite a bit of this, and then all we have to do is come back and touch up. But you're going to get into areas like in here. You're going to do that, and you can see what happened. It took the tire, the axle, part of the car, and everything else. Control Z, undo, leave it alone. That will get rid of most of your old background. Now it's time to come back in here and doing some touch up. The one I'm going to use is Selection Brush Tool. And you've got an add and a subtract on this one too. What I'm going to try to do here first, I'm going to enlarge it. And I use Control plus or Control minus instead of trying to use the enlarge or the magnifying glass. That goes much quicker on this one here. Now, the add and subtract. Let's get that out of the way real quick here. I'll get this brush up here where we can see it. Let's say I come in here and oops, I went right over the top of that. If you go back down here, it says add. If I move that to subtract, I can come back up here. I'm going to move that in a little tighter so I can see exactly where I'm at. And I can remove, holding down the mouse button, and I can remove my mistake. Now I come back up here where it's marked, Control X, and that's all cleaned up. Now, to clean up some of these other areas, and I end up going around the whole car, and that's just the way I do it. I'm going to change that brush just a little bit, bring it down a little smaller. there's areas that need to be touched up, especially along the edge, and what I do is I will come along, I'll probably go completely around the whole edge. Now, there's some areas down here that you'll notice along the top is going to have to be cleaned up anyhow. So if I start here at the top, click once, hold down the shift key, move my mouse down a little bit, and click the mouse again. Click the mouse, move it, I still have the shift key down, and I just kind of work myself around that edge. I still got the control, or correction, I still have the shift key down, so it just keeps carrying it. And I kind of come right on around the end like this. And I'm going to come right on underneath that overhang. And being I'm there, I might as well just come right on down the side here and then let off of it. Now I can use this, I'm not holding the ship, I can use this like a paintbrush also. That's what I think most people know this for is. And if you look over the side here, you can see some areas that didn't clean up. You clean those up at any time. Now, I've done that. Control X. I'm going to show you this because I've done it enough times. I'm going to hit the Control X and everything went in reverse. If I come down here and look, so I want to do the Control Z, undo. Okay, remember we did a correction up here a minute ago, so we want to go back down and change where it says subtract. We want to change that to add because we want to remove. Now if you want to test it first real quick, you can use this as a paintbrush. You got a couple little spots of blue right here that didn't pick up with the wand. Mark those, do a Control X. Okay, we're correct now. Come back up to the roof. That's where I normally start. I eventually will go completely around this whole car. Right now what we're going to do is I marked it by pressing on the mouse. Hold down the shift key. Come down here a ways, click the mouse. Come down a little more. I still have the shift key down. Mark it. Click. And come on down with my mouse. Move it. I still have the shift key down. See, there were some areas along here that need to be fixed anyhow. But this will make sure that I've got a straight line all the way around here. And I'll come right on around on this one and go underneath that overhang a little bit. Once I get that back there, I thought, you know what? I might as well, I still have the shift key down. I think I'm just going to come right on down to about here. Come on out this way. And remember, I can use this as a paintbrush. I don't have to use the shift key. We can use it just like a paintbrush. And if you're getting in close on detailed stuff, you just make the brush a little smaller and zoom in a little tighter on it. And you can see I've marked that area out. I hit the Control X and that part's gone. And we're going to get into some other areas along that same lines. We can come up here, this bar that runs down the front right here. That's only comes to about here because a piece of that mirror. And we're going to come out, come around, come down this way, mark that, and that bar is straight all the way down. So we're going to catch it that way. You can kind of move over next to it, come back up, hold down the shift key, and get that out a little further. Control X, and that's out of there. Now, there's some other areas down here that will clean up fairly quick also if I go back to the wand. Now, if I come down into here, and we're also, when we get down here, we'll clean up some of this other stuff. Some of this that was underneath the car that didn't clean up, I can use the wand and come in here and click Control X, click Control X. And eventually, if you do that a couple times, eventually that whole thing will fill in for you and you won't have to mess with it. Come over here, here's a little bit more of the sunlight. Here's another little piece of sunlight. Another little piece of sunlight right there. Might do that twice if I can get the rest of that in there. And that right there. Now if I can get the edge right there. And if you notice over here in the wheel well, you can actually see through the wheel well and see the concrete on the other side with the design that's in the wheel well. And I can come up here and I can catch some of this up here too. You got to watch this one because this one wants to cut into the license plate. Now there's a place that we can come back, use the brush, do a subtract, and come back up here and clean that up so it doesn't get into the license plate. And it also got into that one steering rod right there, so I'm going to come in there and then come out to about there and clean that out at the same time. So I should be able to do back here, should be able to do a Control X, and that's all cleaned out. There is another area in here that missed it, so we can always come back in here and Control X and straighten that out. Down in here we have several options down in here that I can show you real quick, and we have to clean all this out. I usually end up using the brush. Make my brush a little bigger here. I can come along here, hold down the mouse, let off, hold down the shift key, click, shift key, click, shift key, click, hold down the shift key, click, 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 click. And I can do the same thing coming the other direction. Probably use a little picking up another piece of shadow off of somewhere underneath the car there, but we want it there. We want it to show. Now I'm going to follow that. Clicking a little closer, I'm going to follow that tire down here a ways. And I'm going to hit the Control X. See how we've cleaned that up? Now you got a couple options here. Sometimes I'll come up here and I will use the rectangle tool where I can actually draw a square box. It functions the same way. Draw the box, hit the Control X. Control X, draw the box, Control X. You can get rid of some bigger areas a lot quicker. As long as you got to be careful you don't cut into your object that you want to save. I'll make that a little smaller so you can see what we're doing. I can come in here and come all the way over and down with the rectangle box and do a control. And you can clean it up. Cleans up fairly quick. And so there's other areas that you're going to run into the same thing. All along this shadow, you're going to have to do a straight line along there. Up in underneath the car again, we're going to use the wand, the magic wand, because that will pick up quite a bit of that. Control X, Control X, Control X, Control X. All these little spots underneath here. And you can clean all that out. Part of the detail that you're going to end up running into is going to be around and inside some of there. This I think cleaned up fairly well around that spring. I think inside the spring cleaned up fairly well. Got some areas underneath here where the shadows don't hit, but you can see the sunlight on the driveway. And you get up in here, we're going to have to come along and we're going to have to fix this along here, just like we did across the top. Same thing in here. We don't want to see the rooftop of that building behind there. Now some of it will clean out, some of it won't. Some of it you'll have to use the paintbrush and come down with the paintbrush and clean that out. We're not going to do it all here. We're going to skip around a little bit, but I want to make sure that you see everything we're doing. See, I use that shift key, mark it, move a little bit, hold down the shift key, mark it, come down with the mouse, click. Whole time I've got the shift key down, so it just kind of follows it all the way around. And it comes down to that mirror, starts around the mirror, and if you cut a little bit into the mirror, I don't think anybody's going to see it. And we're going to come clear over to brackets, you'll know what people can see and what they can't see. Go on the other side, and we're just coming right on up to here. There's some brackets right there. Now that bracket holds the mirror on, so we don't need that bracket. Oops, went a little bit too far. Undo the last one. Remember that undo key. And then start our way right on around this way. And then let off the shift key and then use it as a brush and clean up the rest of this in there and hit the Control X. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. So if I bring that back out, we've got half the window cleaned out and half of it not. So we've made quite a bit of headway on this. Bring that back up. We've made quite a bit of headway. Now is the detail. I mean, you get inside this windshield and try to remove all that. It's more of a time consuming down between that bar here. Down up around this tire. That's the part that's going to take the time and time consuming. But once you get done, it did clean out a lot already that you don't have to deal with. Moving along, in order to save a little time, I went ahead and completed the transparency on the background. And also I did import sand beach background, which I think would look nice in this setting. If I go back to the T-Roadster with the transparent background, one thing I do need to show you right off is, now I'd like to save this separately. If you come up here to File, Save As, keep in mind what you need to save it at is one of two different files. Not a JPEG. One is the GIF file, or come on down here, and I save most all of mine as PNG, and that leaves that image with the transparent, even if you use it somewhere else. I use them in websites and stuff where they want to keep the picture, the background for the website one thing, but they want to move it to the next page, and each one's got a different background. And it will maintain the transparency. You can save that as a JPEG. The only problem is, and I'm going to show you, if you save that as a JPEG, it saves the background as white, not transparent. I already did one and saved it there. It's going to come back as white background. And if you're going to use it in one of your images and use it as transparency, means you're going to have to come in here again and remove it all. It would go a lot faster because you've already got thin lines and the backgrounds are already taken care of. If I go over here to the wizard and come down, we got the wizard selected. I come up here in the middle of the screen. If you look what it's outlined, it does a perfect cut. But you're still going to have to go in and do around the windows, down underneath the springs, underneath the car, and some of those areas you're going to have to redo those. So save it as a PNG or a GIF file. I recommend the PNG. I'm going to close that out and just get rid of it. There. We're back to the one with the transparency. This part goes really fast. I'm going to select the background, and we're going to come down here to the bottom where it says Photo Bin, and if you click on that, it's going to open up what we have loaded into the software. It's called the bin, and you can see down at the bottom, you can see our background, and then you can see the transparency of the T-Roadster. All I have to do is put the mouse over the transparency T-Roadster, hold the mouse down, and bring it up and drop it right in the middle of the screen. If you want to leave it that big, it looks good. I'm going to come over here on the left side where it says Move Tool. That gives me an opportunity to kind of move it around a little bit if I want to. As you can see, looking through the windows and stuff, the mountains or the rocks sticking up, the beach and that. You can see them through the windows, through the back window, all the way around the car. Okay, so I'm going to set that in the middle of the screen. We can grab the corner of the markers here and drag this down to whatever we think which is proportionate for what we want to do in this picture. I think maybe just a little bit small, not much. Try bringing it back up a little. And kind of at that point, it doesn't look too bad sitting there on the beach. Might be a little bit too big. We can always bring it down a little bit. We can always move it over, slide it around a little bit. When we think we've got it where we want, you come down here at the bottom of the selection box and click on the green check mark. You can still go back in and move it around, and you can still resize it, not a problem, and bring it down to about there. And whenever you make any changes like that, it's going to ask you to click on the green checkbox. If you've done it by mistake or did something you don't like, click on the red cancel, and you've got it. I don't know if that's close enough. And at that point, you can come up here, and two things I recommend doing. One is to come in here and do a save as. The first thing it's going to ask you to do, do you want to save it as a PSD, which is a Photoshop file, which will remember, I'm going to go ahead and click on it, it will remember all of our settings. So if I want to come back later and move the car over, move it up, if I decide it's too big, too small, I can come back in and open it up that way. And the other one is I can close this now as a normally a JPEG. Come down here, pick out a JPEG. You can see that when I close this up, I've used that same picture as my wallpaper on my windows. I liked it that well. I hope this video will help you. I thank you for taking the time to watch it. Look forward to doing some videos in the future for you, and thank you.